The ModernJeeper Show, the show about Jeeps, Jeeping, and Jeepers.
Well, welcome, Modern Jeepers, to another episode of the ModernJeeper Show. This is episode number 154. We've actually got Jessy, Rockstar Jeep Girl, on the other camera. How you doing, girl?
I'm good. Sitting in the other room.
Yeah, we had to move cameras around because of our other
and...
co-host Matson is actually traveling up to Oregon to spend some time with his family this week. And our guest, Mr. Martin Castro, the events and activation manager for Tire Co., is with us. Welcome, Martin.
Howdy.
What's going on, buddy?
Well, I'm here basking in your glory of the ModernJeeper.
You've been a busy guy.
I tend to be. Yeah, a lot of people, they're like, oh, I never see you, and no, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I mean, only until the last 5 years, it's just been mostly me on the front lines out, kind of being the person at large for the brand. And
yeah, we're lucky, we're fortunate, because wherever we go, if it's an event, you're around there somewhere. We may not have to spend a whole lot of time together, but
you get a hustle on that CTI trailer. Like, you got people just lined up to talk to you. Like, for me, they're just like, hey, you got any chapstick?
Hey, your chapstick is amazing, though. I love the chapstick.
It's important, right? It's just vanilla. That's kind of had the right flavors, good texture, all that. Yeah, I'm big on the little things, you know. That's
and for us, we're sitting here watching it snow its brains out outside. It's probably not doing that in California.
You know, it's chilly today. It's
is it?
I think there's like a high of 62.
Yeah,
had to put a jacket on, bro. I know.
Well, I think it's like 25 here, so yeah.
But you live in, I mean, it's beautiful.
It's Colorado.
Like,
yeah,
it's great.
It's Colorado.
Yeah,
it's
and
all
you have
good.
great beer.
Yes.
So let's chat a little bit about you just got back from KOH.
I got from King of the Hammers. So you had asked some questions earlier in this conversation about Milestar's involvement. This was the first year that we've been there in a formal fashion.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I've sponsored teams for the last approximate 5 years. And through that, it's mostly because I'm a big fan, being a competitor.
I was going to say you're a competitor as well, so.
Used to be, not this year.
Right.
This year, someone had to be the official cat herder for Milestar at Hammers, so that was me. But we had our semi out there. We had a pretty solid spot on the short course. And it's really laying the groundwork for some stuff that we have planned in the future. Today we have a competent product, the MT-01, and specifically the Black Label, which is a DOT approved soft compound. So it is able to compete within the 4,500, 4,800 Everyman Challenge competition.
That's the same
John
tire
Matthews.
I run the Black Label MT-01 on my LJ.
That's right. And it's a 38, right? That's what you're running?
38. Yep.
Right. So unique size. It's great to see that other competitors got on that train and started producing 38. It's cool.
And the first EV.
That's right. So we were on nearly every vehicle, actually every class. We had a competitor, whether it was 4,800, 4,500, 4,600. We had two Suzuki Samurais, built by a local kid here in SoCal, Anthony Hadsel and his brother. They did like twins. Super cool. They're on like little 33-inch tires. And we had the electric vehicle, which is Kyle Seglin. Kyle, that vehicle actually used to be driven by Texas Jesus, and also Bailey Cole. That was his first competition vehicle ever, and him and Texas Jesus used that. Nora 2014, that thing ripped all the way down to the tip of Baja. The last 20 miles, the alternator gave out, so they had to take a battery from like a pickup from some guy on the side of the road to jump start it. They literally just took the battery and just jump started it, and then they got it another like 5-10 miles, and then they had to take a battery from another vehicle, put it in there, and get it across the finish line. Like that chassis has so much history. So it was like, for me, I knew that being at like very, very various places. So I wanted to make sure that vehicle, if it had an opportunity to compete, I wanted it to be on Milestars. So
I get to talk to Kyle today. So
oh yeah,
I'm doing a big article on the EV truck, so I'll be talking to him today.
It's his programs. It's competent. Like, they've got a lot of things. They've got a lot of really good concepts, and they understand how to the limitations of the EV. So they've got like a gantry on one of their trucks, and basically they just swap battery packs. And when they competed at the San Felipe 250 last year, they were going up against Lordstown Motors, and that chassis was like a Geiser built frame, or no, it wasn't Geiser built. It was Brenthal. So Brenthal, I think, went through the chassis and frame. They made like a skateboard. So the base frame, the middle portion of the vehicle was the holder for the battery pack. But they were assuming that they were going to charge the vehicle, do a rapid charge on each pit stop. They had a bunch of issues with that, right? Because they couldn't get the charge to take fast enough. So they made it, I believe, I want to say 80 miles, 82 miles. And Kyle's team, they went 160, 170 miles. And they had the exchange with the gantry. So they knew that the batteries were the limiting factor. So a lot of innovation with that team. And it's a Nissan Leaf based product, and they've got sourced, I forget the supplier, but they've got a third party battery manufacturer here in California that's helping support them with their own custom made battery packs. Like I said, there's a lot of innovation at the grassroots level. This isn't the top thing, it's like garage built, garage developed. He used to work for Tesla, so he's got a background with it. He's very, very familiar. So again, we want to always try to capture unique stories as well as unique people. Again, and I'm all about like respecting legacy. That vehicle has a lot of legacy, and it's stuff like that makes me. That's why I love Ultra 4, is because of where things have come from.
For sure.
It's great to see the evolution, right? I know Matson because him and what was his name? He used to be the editor for some off-road magazine. Was it Crawl, or who was it? Matson, when he was in the party car in like 2012.
Oh, yeah.
Everyman Challenge. They had that TJ or whatever.
Yep.
Right? I competed that car for 2 years. That's where I first met Matson. It's on the lake bed.
Gotcha.
10 years ago. I've been going to Hammers for 11 years, never as a spectator, always as like I either worked it or I was helping out with the crewing for like race teams or the companies that I worked for, or I was a competitor. So I've always been on that side of it. I think
that's it. I remember, I think I went 1 year as a spectator, and then ever since then, same thing. I was either working for GenRide at the time, or I went to the media side and was out shooting pictures on course, or we were so involved with the teams. And it was odd this year. I mean, we didn't go last year just because of the COVID stuff. So Jessy and I, we stayed away another year, and it was cool to watch the live feed. And we've talked about this over the last couple of weeks. They're doing such a good job technology wise now that you can actually sit in your house and get fairly good coverage, but it's still not the same. It's not, you're not you're not smelling the race fuel, you're not breathing the dirt, and you're not talking to the people in person. So yeah, it was kind of hard to just sit here. It's kind of a disconnect, you know?
Yeah, I think as a competition, as a product, I think Hammer King Productions has done a very, very good job of advancing coverage of an off-road event. There's I don't care what anybody says, it's the best coverage regardless. And they're open about it. You know, they like, there's some other sanctioning bodies and promotional bodies that restrict coverage,
Right.
Which is unfortunate because they want to funnel you to their channel, their revenue stream, and what they're trying to justify with sponsorships. But at the end of the day, you're not letting it be what it could be, right?
Right.
And that's what I love about Hammers. They sold over 200,000 wristbands, which means there were over 200,000 people on that lake bed, which is unreal. Like, I thought last year was big. I thought last year was, I thought it was one of the largest that they'd ever done. This year doubled that and then some.
Yeah.
And it was, unless you've been there like at the beginning when there was nothing, like if you wanted good food, you had to bring it, you had to cook it. It brutally cold, the rain.
Yeah.
There used to be always shitty weather.
Yep.
Like if you were in the lower pits in Hammertown, like that's a lake bed. It was so muddy and so bad. Like you're throwing down pallets just to keep your feet and vehicle out of the muck because it would sit and linger for 4 days. And you'd have to prep a car coming off of qualifying, and it's just full of mud, full of garbage. And you're just like, you know, it's still Hammers. You're still in the middle of a lake bed. Like you still got to do that. So it's just a lot of manual labor. Now now they have concerts. Now they've got like 14 different food vendors. They had a brewery with a limo service. Like I think for a week-long event, now they include all the desert stuff, right? So we've got trophy trucks and buggies and desert UTVs, which are different competitors than some of the rock crawling UTVs, which have been there for quite a long time. I think it's great to see that it's all there. So hats off to Dave Cole and his team and Hammer King Production. But the one thing that I love is our winner, John Matthews. I've worked with him for almost a decade. And at various spots have always supported him. And it was when I came to Milestar 5 years ago, he was one of the first people I reached out to. He had bought this car, the car that he won in. It's a true modified vehicle for $4,500. It has a true TJ frame, TJ tub, and it was developed. It was one of the first ones developed, and it was raced by Jordan Townsend. And at the time, I was working with Savvy Off-Road and John Curry when they were competing in their car, the 88. And it was always John Curry and Jordan Townsend in this car.
Yep.
The car had a lot of legacy, but it had never won at Hammers. So John has been just through the ringer between splitting an axle housing and having some engine trouble last year.
2 years ago for the axle housing.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was crazy. I was in a 4800 car, and he was killing it. I mean, he was out so far ahead, it wasn't even funny. And then we come into main pit, and they're like, "Yeah, John's like third overall." And I'm like, "Oh, that's amazing, yeah." And then we're headed out from the desert to do the rocks, and then I see him pulled off to the side, and I'm like, "No, all right, we gotta keep going." But it was like, you know, like that was our best shot, you know, I think as a brand at that point to get a podium. But for him to win in a true vehicle, not like a custom built vehicle or a custom built chassis, it's very much the spirit of the class and spirit of the competition. And again, it's competed for 11 years. And so when people say that it's getting out of hand, I really don't think that. I talk about this often, at least in person. People just don't spend the time to prove their vehicle or to prove themselves in Johnson Valley. You know, you can be a competent rock crawler from all over the United States.
Right.
But when you put that helmet on and there were 140 competitors that started that race.
Yeah.
140. The 140th was Stainless Brain Fabrication, right? And my boy Robbie and Eric, they drove down. They just finished the car Sunday night before the week of the race. They drove down from the Seattle area all the way down to Hammers. They got it teched and did contingency, threw a shock tune on it Wednesday night, and drove. I think they got 150 miles before they timed out. Like it, but you know, like that's how big the class is. But if you don't spend the time, you know, all of that, it ends up working against you. There's an attrition of not just the rocks, not just the desert. It's also your knowledge and competency as a driver. Yep. Yeah, your co-driver's knowledge and ability, as well as, you know, racing strategy. How much are you going to spend? What's your fuel mileage? Where are you going to take fuel? If you're up at the top and you know you can run there, how are you going to put pressure on your competitors? Yes, you want to run your own race, but there's a lot of things that you can do, because if you're at the top, if you're in the top 10, other competitors are going to be watching when you take fuel, when you stop, you know, what your vehicle issue is, and they're going to try and strategize and know how hard to push themselves. So whether they're listening on the radio or they've got somebody watching the live feed or some combination of that, there's always a lot of team competition.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So John, sorry.
I mean, you remember tire ball days and all that. How do you? I
never want to do that again.
Oh,
ever.
Yeah. What a crazy. Those were some crazy years when you got guys, you know, throwing the little balls out, and when they lose a tire and stuff. But it seems to me that, I mean, I know that the rocks have not changed out there. They're still the same rocks. Do you think technology has gotten better in with everything? I mean, breakdowns happen, people lose a few tires, but I don't get the impression that anymore I mean, I remember people would just lose tires. Like, we'd take 12 out there as spares to pre-run.
So we'll start with why this happened, and it has a lot to do with tire balls. So tire balls they're effective at keeping the tire going once it has a puncture. And when you're in the desert, the stupidest stick can get into the crown, and you've got a tire flat.
Right.
Doesn't matter. And sometimes when you're in the dust, you know, if there's no wind, the dust is really bad. It's really thick. So sometimes, even though you've got your line choice, and your co-dog could be getting you on the line that you want to be, that you might want to pass somebody because you want to get out of their dust. But when you do that, you can hit a bush. So small things like that created an issue. So tire balls were this way of, the tire would get you to the next pit. You could change it because you could tell that the tire was down, even though it was still, you were able to drive 50 to 75%, which is the whole point, right? You're trying to maintain a higher average rate of speed. You're trying to maintain movement. With 3 or 4 years of that, tire companies started to get frustrated with Ultra 4. And they said, look, if you're going to allow this product, there's no reason for us to compete, because how can we demonstrate the quality of our product if we don't have that opportunity? It's taken from us now, right? Yes, the competition is good, but this is not going to spurn innovation for tire manufacturers. And tire manufacturers are a big, big part of King of the Hammers as an event, right? And it's certainly, like, there's a reason why we want to be there, right? Even though people thought, oh, we're not there. It's like, no, we actually supported 10 cars, but thanks for paying attention.
Right.
Anyways, that's okay. Like, if they're not paying attention, I mean, that's on them. But we gave them something to pay attention on, but it took time. Well, tire balls forced this change, right? So we had a rule change in Ultra 4, and it made sure that your tires couldn't have any auxiliary inflation or device within the tire. And there's a specification for, they'll pull the tire, the valve core, and they'll deflate the tires of the top finishers in order to make sure that you're not running an auxiliary bladder or tire balls, which go against, the rules, because Ultra 4 wanted to make sure that the competition was genuine. And there's been a lot of innovation in that time. People were using soft compound BFG projects, right? Those are some of the initial ones. I think Eric Miller, his first win was on BFGs. Yeah. Right. You can look at the evolution of that product into the KR3, which is in many people's minds one of the best products out there. Nitto built a soft compound, which was known as the K spec, and then they built a 2.0, and then they've got another version where the sidewall buttress it's very small, very minimal. Their thinking was that because of failures at King of the Hammers, because they were getting the sidewall was splitting from the top at the buttress. Like if this is the tread base, it's splitting down the side. And they were feeling like there were stress risers created by the exterior of the sidewall because of those added, the traction providers, like because they've got these blocks that are very reminiscent of, right. They're very reminiscent of like a BFG crawler red label, right? Right. So it's a maximum traction tire, but they found that, okay, there could be a potential failure point with the product. Now, this all happens because of innovation, driving for competition, because people want to prove their product in an extreme environment. Ultra 4 provides that with King of the Hammers. It's known as one of the hardest single day races in the world. Right? Mm-hmm. And even the trophy trucks this year were just, that continues to grow, and they're just astounded at how difficult the desert terrain is. Mm-hmm. Those guys are coming off of the Parker 425. They got to turn around and do a 1 week prep on their vehicles if they compete, because they want to do the best in the desert series points, and they want the purse for the desert challenge. So that event itself, even just the desert, is hard, but it's a great way to prove your product, whatever it is: wheels, axles, gears, drive shafts, shocks. So much innovation. We have vehicles now with electronic suspension that's near OE level or beyond OE level. And that development, much of it happened in Johnson Valley. Right. In the off season, they're doing this testing and innovation there. So it's really becoming this thing. So why does Milestar want to be there? Well, we want to show that our product can do that. And I'm grateful that we've got competent drivers and people that believe in us. John Matthews was able to do that with a DOT product, no liners. We didn't have a single flat. He did. Shout out to Eric Jokinen from Torque Masters. He had a huge repair and fix on the bolts on the rear of the axle shaft, the full float flange. He had gotten into some rocks coming into pit 1, going out on lap 2, and only 3 bolt heads were left. Oh, wow. Yeah. And they were all, they were all drilled and safety wired. So Eric, quick thinking, he knew exactly how to get them out quickly. It took him 5 minutes to replace the 5 bolts. It was amazing. And thanks to the Gomez brothers for their generous donation of some 12-point bolts. It was, that's really what Hammers is about. It's the community. But, having competent people in the right place ensures that you're going to reduce the amount of attrition that the desert and the terrain will have on your competition and your product. So
Dave has always done such a good job, and every year he changes things this year, and we talked about it with Ian last week. And going into some rocks before you get into that desert stretch, getting up into Turkey Claw there, that's that added. Oh, okay. Well, let's go. Instead of just taking off and going and running in the desert for 100 miles first, you throw some rocks into it, and the level of difficulty increases. But then he's constantly this thing has always evolved, and more than if half of the car's finished, well, you can guarantee that next year it would be completely different race.
Right.
It is that toughest one-day off-road race on the planet. So how do you, with technology evolving, you've got to then change the course. You've got to add miles. You've got to add more difficulty to it in order to keep that balance.
One of my favorite years was when they did crowbar on the first lap, and they did it every lap in the desert. And that's probably one of the harder trails out there. And people were getting flats because it's like Fisher Mountain, where there's a lot of iron ore deposits. So it's a really sharp shale type rock. And it'll cut your tire just looking at it wrong. You can be on the line, and because there's off camber stuff, your rear wants to slide a little bit, especially going at speed. And you can cut a sidewall super easy because the rock is that sharp, which is different than when you get down onto the desert level. It's a different type of terrain, different type of rock, different type of issue, right? So crowbar was great because it was hard technically. It was challenging like that, but it was also a terrain change as well.
Right. And
Dave always wants to balance a good flowing race with difficulty, and it's hard because you guys get stuck on Chocolate Thunder.
Right. Oh yeah. The areas that become a parking lot, you just kind of go, oh, that's going to be a problem this year. Oh, yeah.
People think that Chocolate Thunder, if you don't take it seriously and you don't have a good line picked, and it'll screw you up. It'll make you look like a fool.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the easier trails out there.
Right.
But it was cool. They added Nightmare. They added King's Veto, which is a totally new trail, but it's all these connector trails in between these other trails. I really like that. I've ran Nightmare on my LJ, going up it on Clawhammer, and it's cool because it's like, most people just do Clawhammer, but it's at the top and it's a hard left, and it's gnarly. Like it's loose, big boulders, and the incline, and it snakes. So it's not as technically challenging as like Full of Love, Full of Hate, which is off of Clawhammer as well.
Right.
Because it's like, Full of Love, Full of Hate have like 3 or 4 large waterfalls. It's hard to go up that for sure. But that's what I'm saying, like the diversity of the terrain and the desire to just achieve, right? It's great to see that only 30, 35, 36 vehicles finished in the Everyman Challenge out of the largest field of starters ever. So I feel like the race is definitely on point. The competition's there, but that's why we want to compete there. We feel
this is a perfect segue then into, let's talk about the new developments with Tire Co. and with Milestar Tire brand, and what is, I saw him at SEMA. I've talked to a couple of our friends. Woody's got some 42s out there in Sand Hollow, and what a great looking tire, and to see it wearing, it looks just amazing. So talk a little bit about the new stuff coming.
So one of the biggest problems that we found 2.5 years ago was long-term wear with the MT-01. And when you're at events, you've got to talk to people, and that's their money and their investment. And so there's an expectation about the product. And it's never been anything that we've said, and I've made sure to be like, I'm not trying to say it's the best product, and I've never said that. It's going to be hard for me to say that. Now, do I think that we've got some stuff in the future coming that I think are? Yes, but it'd be competition specific. So again, it's not going to be this daily driver or weekend warrior type product. The MT02, we took a lot of the complaints and the frustrations with the tire, which was irregular wear and difficult maintenance. And we addressed that. We actually did a week of testing in Cougar Buttes with the MT01, and then with 4 different constructions and compounds of potential MT02 candidates. And so we spent 5 days, product evaluation, what's baseline? And then, okay, what are we getting here in terms of traction? What are we getting here in terms of noise? Is the performance equitable? What's different? Is this better? Because it's always a trade-off. Compounding is not linear. A lot of people think like you can just soften it up and it makes it sticky. That's not how that works. Because it is subtle. The chemistry is a huge factor. Mostly because you have, as the tire rolls down the surface, friction creates heat within the product. And when the temperature changes, that's what causes or can cause a difference in performance, right? So you get up on an obstacle and you feel like you need a little more grip. So you might heat up the tires, right? Mm-hmm. And then reset, and then the vehicle could bite. Many different products and drivers will do that. With compounding, you not only have to take into effect the different terrains, because you want to make sure that it's not going to chunk, make sure that it's not going to tear apart or degrade rapidly, right? So you've got to do hard evaluation with heavier vehicles, because weight is another factor. You can increase the amount of heat that's absorbed into a tire because there's greater weight that it has to support. It's really, tire is just a balloon. It's a container for the air. The air is really what allows it to perform and carry a load and bear a load. Tires have load ratings, which is different than ply ratings. I have to talk about this. I get questions weekly about it, where people think like E10 has to do with, there's 10 plies in it. Well, it's E10 because that's a radial reference, referencing to a bias ply construction. So it's saying if you had a bias ply tire that had 10 plies, this tire in the same size has the same load bearing capability. That's it. But every DOT tire lists its construction on the sidewall. That's regulation. And most MTs on the market today are 3-ply construction, right? But they could have a C load range. They could have a D, an E, or an F. Most 3/4 ton, 1 ton pickups, they have to have an E or an F load range with an 80 PSI capacity, because the dealerships, they don't want it. They can't let a vehicle go with that dash light on. There was that multi-million-dollar lawsuit with Ford and Firestone and Bridgestone, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And that totally changed tire production at the OE level, as well as changed OE fitment, right? The NHTSA then and the DOT mandated that tire pressure monitoring systems had to be standard equipment for new vehicles after I think 2006, 2007, right? Which was 5 years after that whole Firestone debacle.
Right.
But suffice to say, our innovation, we knew that we could improve the product. We knew that feedback happened. We knew, because we were out there. We're with consumers. We are consumers ourselves. Like, I wheel, my boss wheels. We know what, and we've wheeled on different products, right? My boss grew up on Super Swampers and Intercos. I mean,
yeah,
we have that experience, right? That's part of the reason why we built a 38, was because two reasons. One, because it was a size that really wasn't there as far as a radial product at the mass produced level. And we didn't know if we could build a 40. So let's make sure we can get something bigger than a 37, but we can build a 40. That's not the issue. We can build 42s now, which is great. And it's a genuine 42. I mean, it's 41 and 5/8. It's just a hair larger than that when it's on the rim, when it's on the vehicle. And I think as a radial product, that's really good. There's a lot of products that are out there that say 42, and they really measure 40 or 40 and a half.
Mm-hmm.
They might be the most expensive product out there. They have a really great compound, but certainly size is proving on Woody's vehicle. It's showing that it's capable, and that's what's exciting. This is just a DOT product. We're just having him evaluate it to give us further feedback in an extreme usage. One of our concerns is the sidewall going to hold up at that size, with that size,
Right.
in that application? Portals put in an incredible amount of leverage directly on the tire. When you don't have portals, you've got, in extreme situations, extreme traction, your axle shaft, it's going to twist, especially chromoly. It's designed to do that, right? Everything's got a little give. When you put portals, all that action is directly on the outside. So there's greater leverage being applied, and there's the ratio itself. Right. So you're getting more torque multiplication closer to the actual point at which traction's being had. Right. So that is a concern, because yes, we can build a product, but we also want people to be satisfied with what they get. Like, value is one of our biggest things. And people were so excited by a product that was true to size, capable enough, and readily available. And initially there was this is a weird thing about the tire industry. There's multiple levels of distribution. So 3-step distribution, 4-step distribution, everybody's trying to make $1 on it. And some people only want to make $1. So they're like, well, I bought your stuff on Amazon for $200. And it's like, that's cool. That's not me. Well, it says Milestar tires. It's like, sure, that's just what the Amazon's saying. That supplier is Jim Bob's Tire in Kentucky, who's buying it at a massive discount because he's got a buddy at a wholesaler who's giving him, that direct price. Right. And then he's adding $1 or $2. And he's just trying to get unit volume at the wholesaler for an annual bonus or kickback or spiff, whatever you want to call it. That has nothing to do with us and our sales program. That's how crazy it gets. But when people want to understand maybe the pricing structure and some of the things that we face now with new products, let's talk about logistics, because we were talking about that earlier. It used to be that if you were to ship a product overseas, right, whether it's Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, Japan, the average cost per container, anywhere between $3,000 or $4,000. Because of pick a situation, pick a reason, the last 2 years have just created a huge strain because there's might not be enough labor at the port. Okay, we've got that fixed, but now there's not enough containers to put things in. So any container that you get, it's going to be priced higher because they know that you have to ship your stuff. So the problem initially starts with trying to ship something and move something. So what was originally $3,000 or $4,000 balloons up to $12,000, $16,000 per container. And if that's quadrupling landed cost. You can't get around the fact that it costs that much. So shippers are sending that, and they're offloading that onto the manufacturers. And now you've got to say, okay, I either want product to sell or I don't. So we're eating that. And so that's why there have been so many cost increases, as well as cost increases with natural materials, raw materials, whether it's steel, natural rubber, which is white, which is produced by rubber trees, or it's a big issue is the price of a barrel of oil, because there is at some point there's some sort of usage of synthetic compounds or synthetic materials that are derived from petroleum, which is going to vary based upon market price for a commodity that's traded internationally. It's not like, we don't have nationalized oil production or anything like that, right? No. It's in a free market. It's been something that was commoditized to be traded. Well, because of that, the price inflates. But that affects all these things that are produced out of that barrel of oil. And those things are what's coming to bear. People are asking, why are tires, why is the cost increasing? You guys just want more money. Even shipping domestically, truckers
is more expensive. Yes.
Right. But they're saying, look, I'm going to take this job. I'm not going to take that job. Why? Because this job, I'm only going to have a downtime of an hour. Whereas that job, you're going to make me wait 4 or 5 hours when I could be already turning and burning, hauling an empty to some port or to some location. Whatever the justification is, logistics, if you can ship something or move something, you've got a lot of leverage right now because people just want stuff moved. And for them, I'm super happy that, private owner operators are getting that, because that's how the free market works, right? Not only can you get a product for a better price should you want it, but that same thing on the labor side happens. So that's why we see all this inequity with rapidly happening, where 1 week it's one price, the next week it's this price, and you're like, what the hell happened? All of these things tend to fall downstream, which is affecting pricing, and that's affecting pricing for everybody. Through that, we decided to try to take the nice thing about being a privately owned company and an American-owned company is that we have a lot of ability to make our own decisions. We don't have a foreign office trying to tell us what to do, what we need. We get to make that decision. Again, that's why we were able to produce the MT02, why that's debuting this year, why we're able to build a 42. It's because the market's there, and two, we can. So why not? The thing that we see is that I forgot what I was talking about, bro.
So for so that our listeners have some perspective too, we've been working with you guys for a long time, for
2017,
yeah,
2017.
So since 2017, and we have, in just the fleet that I'm in charge of and that I control, between the CTI trailer, our tow rigs, our personal rigs, we ran some of the original MTs that were still, I think, betas. We ran some of the XTs when they first came in.
They were first production. They weren't betas. We had already done beta testing. But yes.
Okay. And it's been awesome because we also get to send you guys some feedback and share some of it. And when I first started running the XTs on the tow rig, we all were kind of looking at them going, well, how are they holding up? What's going on?
Right.
But mileage. I never, we
were worried about mileage and
absolutely.
Remember you remember that there was that big cold snap in Texas that one year, and you were going across country, and there was like a scare with like a tornado or something, and you were like, man, I'm holed up under here. The freeway's frozen, and I'm underneath this overpass trying to make sure that my Dodge doesn't get swept up.
Right? Yeah.
It was so bad. I remember that. But you were like, I have no problems with the tires.
No, right? Everything worked out fine. And it's just, I think that's rare in today's manufacturers. People always say they want feedback, but do they really? Because when we start to provide some of that feedback, sometimes it's like, yeah, we know what we're doing. Thanks.
It's hard. That's one of the hardest things that I do deal with is, you don't want someone to be unhappy or dissatisfied, or let alone like getting upset. And sometimes I've had to crawl on my belly and be like, I'm sorry you had that experience as a customer. We want to make that right, even though it's like there's 3 or 4 levels between us. We didn't really sell you that, but we have to own it because it's our product, and we want to own it. Like from the top down, we want to do the right thing. And sometimes I've had interactions with consumers where I've had to, again, apologize because I had an opportunity to take care of something, didn't do it, went south, but we're able to, most of the time, very rarely have people ever had a bad experience, or there wasn't a time where I couldn't turn that around, which I'm grateful for. I think that's part of the community. I think most people just, want you to be straight with them. We really try to do that. I really try to be honest. Part of that is knowing what your competition is like, what they're doing, what their products are at, where your product is at. And
I remember,
we know
Evans,
that
for an entire year, every shop we went to, people would say, well, we can't get anything out the door. And literally it was coming down on us because, number one, I'm standing in their shop and I'm going, well, what is it that you're waiting for? Well, it was the supply.
Mhm.
They couldn't get tires. They couldn't find a 37. They couldn't find a 35. And so I'm standing there going, well, but did you get your suspension components? Oh yeah, we're able to build Jeeps, but we can't send them out the door because we don't have tires for any of these builds. So it's a very interesting thing when people will they just want to talk to somebody about their issues. And I don't know, maybe there's a little bit of therapy that goes along with all of that too. So
sometimes I feel like I need to go into therapy. I mean, that's kind of the reason why I don't. I'm really not active on social media. Like but I don't post a lot. Like I lurk.
Right.
But like it's not anything that I do, mostly because it's a resource. Just like time's a resource, so is your personal mental state. And I always want to be there for people like you, any of our partners, because I want to try and be there completely. And it's very difficult because you do take those things personally. If someone has a problem, I've got to be responsible for that, right? And so it's okay. We got to try and make this right. The nice thing is that we have the control and the ability to do that. If someone's just dissatisfied and they don't want to do it and they're not receptive, you just got to respect it and move on. But most people, they really appreciate you trying to do the right thing and making the effort. And I think that's part of the reason why we've been able to kind of garner traction as a brand. Again, we're still entry level. There's still things that we're improving and learning on. The MTO2 is I would say the beginning of that, because we improved the compound. We made sure that the traction, one of the things we wanted to do was it could not lose traction versus the MTO1. We wanted to make sure that because people were so engaged by how good or just decent and predictable, like let's just put it there. We'll just bring it there and just, that's what it is. Wow, that was really surprising. And it's quiet. And it's a decent price. And it's true to size. It's got all these things that it was like, okay, that's a good baseline. I think we definitely raised the floor in terms of expectations for maximum traction product. The MTO2 has taken a lot of those lessons about irregular wear. And we've increased the thickness of the tread base. So it's the material underneath the tread. How much that is. We increased that 2 millimeters. Doesn't sound like a lot.
That's a lot.
But small adjustments like that help improve some of the feathering and some of the cupping that people would experience if they didn't rotate at 3,000 miles. And vehicles are so good today that service intervals are put out from 3,000, right? 20 years ago, it was 3,000 miles. Oil changes, major services, chassis lubrication, all that stuff. Like 3,000 miles. Now you got Mobile One's got an oil that 10,000 miles, they say. Right? So that's like, I think I'll go 7,000. But
can you touch base on a crowned tire versus a non-crowned tire?
So our tire tends to crown more than others. I think that it's not because there's less material. The carcass is just designed that way. Part of it is because if you have noise created, that's resistance. It's being created because there's something going on, right? So when you have more void separation between the blocks, it allows pockets of air to get trapped, which creates noise. That's one of the things that people find. There's an advantage to having a crowned tire over the road. And when I say crowned, it's like it's a hard thing to define because people just assume that, like, let's take a ridge grappler or trail grappler, probably one of the more square type tires out there. It's still at proper inflation pressure for that vehicle. So 2017 Jeep Wrangler, right? JK, 37 PSI is your recommended tire pressure. Whether you have a 37 or a 295, 70, 17, like whatever it is. Tire pressure is the thing that supports and bears the load. Yes, you can look at the load index and make an adjustment based upon if you go from like a P metric, like if you had a
passenger car tire.
No, but the Sahara trim, right? The Sahara has an 18-inch wheel. It's an outfitment. It's more of a looks thing, and they have a tire specifically designed from Michelin or Bridgestone for that spec trim level of a Wrangler. And they'll compare 8 or 9 tires, and they'll look at what do we want to prioritize for this trim level. Do we want to prioritize efficiency, low noise, ride comfort, high traction, whatever that is? Those are the things that they look for qualifiers, right? At the OE level. And so you'll have typically a P metric product because it rides better, and most people
all those. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're buying a Sahara, you're not buying like the most extreme Jeep, right? You're buying a Jeep that has more luxury items, right? They put more padding into the seats. That's one of the things that people don't realize. They've done that since TJ's.
Mm-hmm.
I have a set of original Sahara seats in my LJ because they're so much more comfortable than
I call
the
it
other
the
ones.
Diva Jeep.
The Diva
What?
Jeep.
I call it the Diva Jeep.
I mean, but they're nice. But again, it's targeted consumers, right? So when we talk about P metric, and then you go put an LT tire on it, and it's 2 or 3 times the size overall. You're like, oh my God, what do I do? What's my pressure? Well, the pressure stays the same because the vehicle weight is staying the same. That's a generic thing that we say, partially because Bridgestone, Firestone. If I were to recommend an underinflated pressure and you were to get into an accident, first thing that they're going to look at is tire pressure. That's the only thing touching the ground. You can look at a load inflation table and adjust based upon that. And load inflation tables, this is an education point, hopefully that your listeners appreciate it. It's actually provided by the Department of Transportation and the NHTSA. It's not something that is made by a tire manufacturer. There's a reason why we build tires to the DOT standard. It's because we need a baseline in order to approximate and equate things. So that way, when you buy something as a consumer, you're roughly getting this. That's why labelings tend to be consistent, like HTs, ATs, XTs, RTs, MTs, whatever that is. It's a competitive, with people selling different products, you want people to easily know what roughly compares to what, right, in a generic sense. And some of the nerds and the people who are very, very specific and do deep dives, they'll be very attention to detail with what does this mean? Why do I want this? This is the reason why I run this tire in this situation. And on this vehicle, I run this other product. But not everybody's that informed. But there's a reason why there's standards there, because it's to help provide a baseline for consumers, for accountability for when they purchase. Accountability if something were to happen. That's why that happens. So you can look at a load inflation table. You can say, well, based upon this load range in this product, I can lower my tire pressure and it would provide the same load bearing capability as the other one. But what we were finding with the MT-01, when people typically do that, you put your vehicle on 37s, 38s, Gladiators, you can bolt on a set of 40s, but you need a spacer lift at the very minimum, right? You need shocks or some basic pieces to add in order to help provide that lift and that clearance. Even if we're not even talking performance, right? We're just talking about the ability to drive that tire and steer on the road and not hit anything like a fender or the frame or something like that. So when you have people focusing on this trend of going larger and bigger, there's got to be a baseline. People typically do these basic adjustments or basic improvements, and then they get these tires that are built for possibly a 3/4 ton truck. Maybe they have a set of 20-inch rims, maybe they have a set of 18-inch rims, whatever that is, but they've got an F load range on that tire or an E load range. Typically, not always, but typically the higher the load range, the stiffer the carcass.
Absolutely.
Right? And then that's going to translate. That's your first suspension component, right? That's the first thing that's going to adjust or translate the surface into the chassis, which transfers into the cabin. So those are some of the first things that that people experience. They experience the harshness of that tire now that it's changed. Why has my ride quality changed? This used to drive so nice. You make these changes and they're pretty big. They look cool, right?
We had that.
Let's be honest.
Today.
Aesthetics play a huge factor into why people choose what they choose when they modify their vehicles.
Yeah.
Some people strictly focused on performance, like that's their top motivator. But when you have the best-selling Jeep Wrangler in the world, and Ford comes out with a competitor that's targeted right at the best-selling Jeep Wrangler ever made, and they're trying to capture that market, these people who would buy other vehicles are now buying Wranglers, Broncos, 4Runners, Tacomas. And we get into this where there's new people experiencing this, and they're wondering, this didn't happen in my Camry.
Right.
This didn't happen in my Fusion. And then you're like, well, it's very, you're changing so much of the vehicle. And
it's that whole, we're upgrading, and we have that conversation all the time with every rig that gets on the CTI trailer is, well, I've spent $10,000 on upgrades, but it's horrible. It rides terrible, and it's the expectation for the dollar spent. I mean, you can spend very, very little and make it to where it looks really good, but it may not perform like you were just hitting on. It's not going to perform the same. And, it's kind of funny. I was just working on an article the other day about, do we really get what we pay for, or do we even understand what that is? There's always an expectation, and where we spend money, how does it meet that expectation? And 9 times out of 10, our expectations are always way up here. And I've found a deal here, and then, wow, it didn't work out so well, but I thought it would be so much better because I upgraded. Yeah.
Well, yeah, performance, right? And that's the thing. Right? What do we define, right? And this is, one of the best things about going to events is when you can talk to people and talk. Like, I started the very basic before we even get into product, before we get into anything. I'll have guys that are like, "Oh, BFG's best tire ever made. Why would I want to go to yours?" And I was like, "Okay, well, what do you want to talk about? What are you using it for? What's your expectation?" I always start with expectation. What's your intention? What vehicle do you have? Because that helps me know how do I talk to you? What are you focused on as a consumer? And again, this is the best thing about being out at events or talking to people and trying to get into the experience that they have, is we give you a lot of good feedback, even if it's bad feedback. And I do get it. People have different expectations, but part of the reason why I'm out there is to provide education, to be a resource, and provide knowledge, or at least provide a conversation, right? Like you were saying, sometimes it's just being that shoulder to cry on. It happens. Some people just want to vent, and then they're good, and then you don't see them again.
I have this vision of there's those people that just walk around with each hand has got big clumps of mud, and they're just cruising around a vendor show and some of these Jeep events, and they're just walking around with their handful of mud, just wanting to throw it at somebody at some point. Yeah. And sometimes, they toss it out there, and sometimes it sticks. Usually it doesn't, but they still got a dirty hand. I don't know.
Again, you're going to get that. And I think as you broaden, you broaden these opportunities for people to get out and experience things, right? Best-selling Wrangler ever. I go back to that because we're seeing new people. Never owned a 4x4 ever before, right? And never went off-road ever before. And now they're just like, wow, now I got to have this. I've got to have these fenders. I got to have this bumper. I got to have this and that. And it's like, okay, what do you want to do with it? That's a conversation I had with my girlfriend. She was wanting to put a bumper on her JL. She's like, I need to get a bumper. I was like, what do you need a bumper for? She's just got she's got a JL Sport, right? And the dealership hosed her on it so bad. Like I felt so bad. I didn't know her at the time when she bought it, but they said it had a Mopar lift and that it had performance tires and but it was on 20-inch wheels. There's a 35 1250 20 and you're like load range sidewall, which is like if you had an F-150 or an F-250, sure, yeah, I think that's a good fitment. But if you want, because she wants to, she does rock crawl and she does
about that much sidewall on that.
yeah, right. So come to find out, it wasn't a Mopar lift; it was a spacer kit and brackets to get the lift. And they hosed her on it because they had like an upfitment charge of like I think $7-8 grand, and it was just so on a used Sport, and I was like, oh my god. So
they don't like to see me coming because
you know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
right. They see you as a mark, and then you're like, no, I got this.
Right.
Do you know who my boyfriend is?
Right.
But it's so many consumers focus on this let's say surface level stuff, and they're like, well, that's performance. Why are you getting a bumper? Are you hitting your current bumper? Are you coming into obstacles that are just requiring so much more clearance than you currently have? Do you need a winch? Is that why you need a bumper? What are the reasons why? And
all of those conversations. Yep.
And most people, I love like a lot of Gladiator owners. Like I have a buddy, his name's Josh, and he's like, oh, I want 40s for my Gladiator. And I was like, and he's like super into overland, does camping. And he's 100% into it, lives it. Like, I eat well when I go camping with him. Like he's got the setup in my opinion, but he's like, yeah, I want to go 40s on it. I was like, why do you want to go 40s? And he's like, well, I got these big axles. And I was like, why do you get the big axles? You got Dynatracks. And I was like, why are you upgrading? And it's like, well, I need it because I want bigger tires. And I was like, one of the first things, why do you have a bigger tire? Because you want more ground clearance, right? Mm-hmm. That's one of the best conversations. 74 Welds putting out that bolt-on portal kit, right?
Right.
And I think that's going to be, it's going to be killer. But why? Ground clearance, right? And you can fit a larger tire because you don't have to worry about the ring gear and you don't have to worry about your axle shafts as much because the load is in
all outside,
the outside in those hubs, right? So a couple of advantages there. But why are you doing that? Why do you want portals? It's not to say that you have portals, even though we know people that are just like that. It's got portals.
I want to run I gotta have a Hemi. I gotta have a big motor.
I gotta do
all the time. Yeah.
I gotta do those burnouts.
If that's what you want,
that's what you want.
Great. Like I get it. I get that. But if you're saying that you need a V8 because it rock crawls better, I don't know if that's. I would typically say that there's suspension, axles, steering, tires, like all those things have to happen before, in my opinion, that you get a V8, because that's where you find greater off-road rock crawling performance.
Right.
But that's for rock crawling.
Right.
If you want to go up sledge, you need axles, you need drive shafts, you need like full hydro steering, like all of these things. And people don't realize you put 40s on a tire or 40s on a Jeep and you've got stock steering.
Good luck.
Right. You're not going to be able to turn it. And, I like that. If for an entry level product, the Apex kit for JLs, installed it on my girlfriend's Jeep, even though she's got 35s. But I said, look, you're going to go to Moab and it's your first time driving your Jeep in Moab, and you're going to air down, and you don't have lockers. And, we just installed, we got a used Mopar kit, and we put it on there. So we made sure that it had the functionality. And I said, if you wanted more suspension flex or articulation, just unbolt the front sway bar end link and then just let it run. Also, pull off the doors and pull out any weight that you don't need, because weight is your enemy.
Yep.
Right. So she wheeled a whole week with like all of her family and extended family, and they've got built LJs and TJs and all kinds of Jeeps, right? JKs on 40s, all this stuff. And she was doing stuff on 35s. And she did Hamburger Hill. She one-shotted the big waterfall at the base of Hamburger. And I was like, with no lockers, right? And she was at 13, 14 PSI. I was just like jails are cheating. I feel like, their traction control it's cheating. But the other side of it is, the product's that good, but what do you can get performance if you focus on these certain areas, right?
That's right.
Even at 35s, she noticed how hard it was to how much more effort she had to put into the steering at lower pressures in a maximum traction situation. The surface conditions, Moab has a lot of traction. So you should definitely have a power steering cooler at the very least to make sure that your stuff doesn't bubble over, or that, you lose a pump or something. Those are very, very common failures, but it's there's easy situations. But people don't realize that when you go to a 40, it's that much harder on everything else. And you have to improve everything else.
Absolutely. And I guess the downfall of that, or the downside, is the new Jeep owner today, from my perspective, we see a lot of these guys that's, they picked up a brand new Jeep. It's their first one ever. They spent $60,000 on it. They go spend another 20 on upgrades. Yet they don't have any seat time. They don't know what they're really going to do with it. They just want it to look cool. And I understand that person. I get it. But man, if everybody would just slow down a little bit and really think about what it is you're wanting to go do. And it's that whole expectation thing, that you'll be so much more comfortable with all of your decisions to know how you got there.
Right.
I mean, it's the reasons that, a stock vehicle, a stock Jeep, should be able to go through the Rubicon Trail. That was
right.
That was the original plan before Jeep Jamborees got into, now everybody has to have the bigger tire and the bigger axles and all of these things. If they were to learn to drive first, well, a lot of us wouldn't be in business. So,
well, that's what I tell everybody.
Right.
Learn to drive first.
Again, we're seeing that people are transitioning from older vehicles like a TJ or a YJ into a JK or a JL, right? We're seeing this transition, right? So there's second and third owners of those older vehicles into these newer, more modern vehicles. Like, it might be a minivan, but like it wheels, if you do the right modifications, it wheels like a son of a gun, right?
My first off-road vehicle was a Volkswagen Rabbit. You wouldn't believe the places I could take that Rabbit.
Yep.
Front-wheel drive? Just
front-wheel drive, diesel.
Oh, what year did you have?
It was like an 80, I think, or something like
80?
that.
That was super early. I had an 84.
I had glow plugs in it, and lived in Craig, Colorado. I used to carry a 100-foot extension cord with me so I could plug it in wherever I went.
Right, to heat the block. But that thing had like 52 horsepower. And I mean, you had to have the manual transmission. There weren't automatics for those. But I mean, great mileage, and you could, because they were light, you could take them some places, right? But it starts somewhere. And I think
that's right.
Like modern, one of the purposes behind Modern Jeeper is not only in experience, right? Like, let's be honest. Why do people get these vehicles in the first place? Because they see other people having these great experiences and they desire that for themselves. Right? Whether that's the modification journey and building something, or doing enough to get to these places and do these things that they want to do, right? Have that experience, or some type of merging of the two. That's a lot what we see. But that's how broad it is people have these different expectations. But the great thing about a tailored event like Modern Jeeper is you get put in these situations with people who hopefully have more knowledge and capability than you. And you get to see an actual demonstration of the reasons why you should have hydro assist steering if you have large tires. Why do you have large tires? What does that allow you to do? that's having that foundation is important. But when you can do it in an environment where it's comfortable and you can learn, you can have the ability to learn and see and get why. It's not just, your buddies talking crap back and forth at each other. It's, hey, this is why you do it. You see how easy it was for me? It was because of these reasons. Why did this fail? Well, it's because that's your limiting factor, right? Like, this is the thing that now you have to address if you want to drive in that terrain or have that experience. And that's what's so great is like now there is something there, right? Jeep Jamboree came from somewhere, but why it's obviously, nationwide, but there's a lot of other tailored experiences that can be more in-depth and more unique. You provide that, but I try to encourage people to do, my buddy Josh with that Gladiator gets a UTV, gets a Polaris Turbo R, whatever. And it's badass. It's nice, right? Brand new 2021. Wants to add a cage and wants to add all this stuff. And it's like, well, I want to go race this thing. I want to go do this and that. I'm like, whoa, like, sure? Like, have you been racing before? Have you competed before? What's your goal? You want to just have a good time? Because if you want to just have a good time in a competition, you should do NORA. NORA's great for that. Why? Because it's the funnest race on earth, right? It's the most fun you'll have with all your buddies headed down through Baja. And the best part, like, you talk to anybody, like, everybody loves competing in the 1000. It's a thing, and you feel rewarded by it. You know that. Yep. We've been down there together.
Yep.
But what's the best part, in my opinion? Pre-running.
Yeah.
Pre-running.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You get the experience. You're not out of sorts because there's a lot of people around you. There's a lot of things around you. There's a lot of resources, but you're not having to just drive 12 hours just as a pit support vehicle to the middle of like Ojos Negros and wait for another 6 hours because you're waiting for the truck, right? We've had those experiences, but what's the best? Those experiences are great looking back, but leading up to that, I love the pre-running. Nora's like that. That's what I was telling him. I'm like, you should go and find these opportunities. If you do well and you like it, then consider.
Then do something. Yes.
Because it's the money. Like,
right.
Yeah.
Look, you pay for one trip and you're gone 4 days and it's a fully catered experience, right? In Death Valley. Those are your next 2 events, right?
Yep.
That experience, it's nice because you get to be comfortable. You get to take it all in. You're not responsible for guiding or making sure that everybody's happy. I mean, you are, but I'm saying attendees get to go. And that's the difference. That's why it's different than like a normal trail ride or a weekend up in Big Bear. It's the ability to have that space to be comfortable, to push yourself around other people with diverse experience and significant experience.
I say all the time that Death Valley really changed my perspective on what we wheel and what we enjoy doing. And this year, this spring trip is going to be completely different than the trips that we've done in the past. And people go, well, you're still just going to Death Valley. Yeah, they don't understand how big an area. It'd be like going to Johnson Valley and seeing Chocolate Thunder and thinking we did Johnson Valley, we did Chocolate Thunder. Yeah,
hey, there's a lot of people that think that, bro. I've wheeled the hammers. Oh, have you? Oh, really? Okay,
Yeah.
Let's go down King's Graveyard or Dead Blow. Depends on which person you want to talk to. But that's one of the hardest trails I've done in my life. And it was 3 miles in the dark last year. Just I'd never seen it. My driver hadn't seen it, but we were on 3rd lap. Here we go. And there's gnarly drop-offs. Like I got out, I walked 30 yards down, and I was like, all right, it's yours. He's like, no, I got this. I think I can do it. And sure enough, he did it. He knows his vehicle, but Dustin Eisenhower, great guy. But I mean, it's like, Chocolate Thunder is hard. it's not the hardest. Like that's the thing. That's like that's the door.
Well, and the trips we've done in Death Valley so far literally have been, there's been a lot of washboarded road and stuff, but this first trip we've got some real areas with some real rock, and everybody loads up everything that they own and wants to bring it with them. So you've got these Gladiators that weigh 10,000 pounds. There's a couple of spots where we have like a 3 and a 4 foot waterfall, and it's going to be an interesting. It's going to be
interesting. You're going to have to pray for me, Martin, because
poor man. You'd be fine. You're a smart lady. You know what time it is. I wouldn't be worried about you. I feel for you because you're going to have to be giving people support. Speaking of Gladiators, one of the things I learned. So I do this lift kit, and I help my buddy Josh on his. We help him put the 40s on, get the axles slung under it, and drive shaft, right? And the Gladiator's so long that it has its own carrier bearing, right?
Right.
There's people recommending one-piece drive shafts.
I know.
And they have 10 inches of suspension travel. And so it's like when that rear end drops and you're trying to come up, that is the first thing you're going to hit. And it's like, what? Like, I couldn't believe that was a part.
The rear suspension on the Gladiator, guys were just throwing on, either a longer control arm or an adjustable control arm, a taller spring to get the lift. And then the pinion would actually pivot down as it. So now you've got this stupid angle, and people were just snapping U-joints going, why?
Right. And you wonder, did they notice a vibration? Like if you're driving at 70 miles an hour and that thing's, you know what I mean? Like you're just like, how would you? But this is the other thing. People don't know what they don't know. And so it's hard for people with experience to judge them, right? Because you can't, unless they're being like total jerks. Most of the time they just don't know. So again, why do you go to these experiences? Why do you go to EJS, right? There's a huge collection of the community, but you also get the opportunity, if you want, to learn and do things and challenge yourself. Why do you go to a Modern Jeeper event? Because it's, instead of 12,000 people, it's 12 rigs.
10.
And you get serious hands-on time, understanding line choice, understanding how to outfit your vehicle, what the expectation should be, and what the penalties are for having too much weight, or what the penalty is for not having the right parts or the right equipment. But that's what I'm saying. Something so, in my opinion, elementary as a drive shaft with these vehicles, if you didn't, like, Josh wouldn't have known. He's like, well, we need it by Friday. I'm just gonna order that one piece because it's in stock. I was like, whoa. Like, I don't care what anybody says. You don't want a one-piece drive shaft. Like it's too long, and you're gonna hit that before you hit anything else, and then you're gonna be SOL because you're not gonna keep a 20-foot drive shaft as a spare, right? It's not like a TJ drive shaft or an LJ drive shaft.
No, right? Long.
It's long.
Yeah.
He's taking off my Dodge.
Right. Exactly. So, like, small things like that, the reasons why you have certain modifications. When you add more capability, you also have to make sure that everything else attached to it is able to match it.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
But I just try to remind people, you can't, if you have that experience and that person's your friend, like, don't be you can talk some smack and be like, what the hell are you thinking? But don't withhold your knowledge, right?
Right.
The point of the community is to share the knowledge so we can grow together. I didn't learn this stuff out of nowhere.
None of us did. We all had to learn from somewhere.
Yeah, right. Either repeated experiences of failure, or we had enough experience with other people who had those repeated experiences because they might have been pushing the limit. And I've been fortunate to be surrounded by people like that who put themselves into competition and push themselves personally, pushed vehicles and equipment and technology. But that doesn't mean that I know everything. I try to spend more and more time with people like that because I want to know why are you doing that? What is the difference that this is making? You know, those are significant things. Then that's why, again, I know I've repeated the community thing 3 or 4 times, but I'm going to do it again. That's why to me, the off-road community is great. I didn't grow up with the Jeep. I'm the first person in my family to own a Jeep. And I think I bought it because I love the community so much.
Well,
right.
I was having a conversation with Big Rich the other day, and you know, I personally have been very fortunate. I've just been around people that are a lot smarter than me and have a lot more experience, and that's how we grow. And if you just sit back and you say, no, I know it, I know how to do it. We've got a lot of information out there on the internet that may be good, it may be bad, but you got to do it for yourself sometimes as well to make sure that you understand where that information, how it gets used. But yeah, I mean, you hang out with people that know more than you, and hopefully some of that trickles down a little bit. So
yeah, like one of my best friends, I built my Jeep because like one of my closest friends, like he's super sharp, and we built it in his driveway, literally from a frame, from Sergeant Jeep, because my original frame on my LJ was wasted. It was like, you ever see Goldmember and he's like peeling his skin? Oh, that's a keeper. Like that was my frame. They would just, oh, look at that.
Look at that. Just comes off.
Frame horn. Ah. It was terrible. So having that experience of just building everything, starting with a Dana 44, TJ, LJ, Dana 44, you know, and that was big. It had disc brakes. Oh, right. Like people with TJs are like, oh yeah, I still got drums in the back, and I mean, that's a real thing. You know, JK owners, JL owners, they don't have a clue.
No.
Yeah, they bolt on 35s, 37s, and it's like, oh, look at me, I'm Jeeping, and it's like, do you understand how much work it takes to put a 35 on a TJ? You have no idea.
You got to change all these things.
You're changing everything. Everything changes, but without that knowledge of the steering components, without the knowledge of the axles, and how to build it, right? Like chromoly shafts, getting the right lockers, putting lockers in, the right gear ratio. You know, people say, well, you know, 513s are too much for a TJ. You're going to be spinning that 4-liter at 2,500 RPM. It's like, do you care about your transmission? Do you like wheeling? Because if you like wheeling, you get as much gear as you can, because that 4-liter is it's a durable motor, but it's a turd in terms of performance, because it's kind of bad because it's got no compression ratio, right? Like it's 8.5, or no, it's 8.75, 8.8 to 1. It's terrible, and you're not, you know, and I fell down that trap. Oh yeah, I'm gonna do a throttle body and I'm gonna do exhaust and all this stuff, blah blah blah, without really thinking about it. It's like the cylinder head is one of the biggest limiting factors on that engine, right? Because it's got really poor quench, it's got poor compression ratio, the airflow through it it's not optimized, small valves, whole bunch of things that work against it, right? And you think you put these bolt-ons on, oh, it works on these other engines, and it's like the main choke point is that cylinder head. Like you fix that, and then you add that stuff, and then you start making
you made a difference, right?
Decent power, right? Yeah, but this is what I'm saying. This experience, that knowledge, it's easy to even fall into that trap, because you're like, well, you know, it wouldn't hurt, and then you have the snowball effect, and you're left with this big expenditure, and you're like, did I really get everything I wanted out of that?
No.
But again, that's why, like, one of the things, I got friends that are like, oh man, I'm gonna race my JK at Hammers. Okay, why don't you should drive a vehicle that is capable of doing it. I'm not saying they can't do it. I think that's been proven. What I am saying is that if you're going to take your vehicle and you're going to modify it in that way, why don't you learn on somebody else's dime and somebody else's investment? Go and drive it. If they're your friend, or if you're able to, or even just ride with them. Get an experience of how it feels. What is it? If you want the extreme, you're going to learn the hardest of ways if you try to do it yourself, because you're going to, the expenditure is so high.
That's right.
And I don't think people don't realize it until they're in it. And then they're like, oh my God.
Oh, what have I done?
Right. Right. And that's why I was so supportive of like my girlfriend, because I was like, look, we put 35, 12, 50, 17s on this thing. So we change your tires, we change your wheels, get you bead locks. We'll make sure that you've got enough suspension for, it's just a JLU sport. It's entry level, right? And she's still got factory bumpers, factory fenders, but she's got the upgraded, that power assist with Apex. And we reprogrammed it with like a taser, because you want to get the gear ratio right, which is great.
Right.
They're so sensitive to that, right? So you get the gear ratio right, and then that's about it. We really didn't change anything else. She had a death wobble problem, and everybody's like, well, it's something else. I was like, no, she beamed her steering stabilizer pretty damn good. Like, I'm pretty sure that's the issue. Sure enough, I put a Rancho replacement on it, went away. She never had an issue. She'll drive at 75, 80 miles an hour, not a problem now. And it's
nice. People
don't realize how sensitive the new vehicles are, because
absolutely
they're that capable, but you have to maintain them at that level. Like, they require that.
That's right.
But again, how are you going to learn that?
Well, Martin, I think we could probably have like a 4-hour podcast here, I think.
Oh yeah.
Dude, it's so good to talk to you. Your technical knowledge and your perspective on things is just always refreshing, and it's just amazing to me. Like, you're such a smart dude. It's fun to have you on the show. Yeah.
Sometimes I feel pretty dumb, I'm telling you.
Well, yeah, we'll have a part 2, and then we'll talk about more stuff in the tire world that's coming. But I know that
I think we could do that at EJS.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good opportunity. Yeah, we'll definitely see you at EJS, and hopefully, I'm not sure if we'll get to see you beforehand. I was hoping you'd make it out to the Death Valley trips or one of them, but
I'm hoping to as well. I do, because like we talk about the travel schedule. I've had some sales support events that I got to do. One's out in Atlantic City, and it's like the week right before, and then I've got another event in the Midwest, and I'm flying from Springfield, Missouri to Grand Junction, driving from Grand Junction on the 10th of April to go to Moab for EJS. So it's like week after week after week. Like we'll be traveling for 5 weeks straight. Which is not bad. I'm not complaining, but what I'm saying is like time's a resource. And
the other
problem I have, my firewall is, I got like a 6-inch tear in my firewall from my battery, because the battery support that I have, look, I like to drive my vehicle, and I enjoy it. And let's just say I'm finding some of the weaker parts of it. And look, like, I built it for a reason, like, that's why. But let's just say there's some maintenance stuff that I found this last weekend that I'm like, oh man. Like I said, I love Jeeps, hate Jeeps at the same time.
I get it. I get it. Well, I appreciate your time, and I know you're a busy guy too. And I'm looking forward to Easter Jeep Safari.
Yeah, me too.
Anything else you guys want to add?
No, I think. I'm looking forward to. I know there's going to be. You guys are actually going to. You're going to do a trail ride this year, right? You're actually going to get out. Or you be working that trailer.
Oh no, we'll get to go do something somewhere.
Or at night.
Yeah, or after.
That's where all the
trailer,
fun
something.
happens.
We'll figure something out. We'll make it happen.
We got a condo, so we'll make sure that I'll let you know where the party's at. You come on, hang out.
Cool.
But
all right,
it's been good. I appreciate you just coming on and just doing this, and supporting me.
We love to talk technical, and you're good at that. So
yeah, probably too much.
All right, guys. Well, we'll stop the recording here, and we can chat for a little bit afterwards. But thanks for being on, and we'll see you on the trail.
Thanks, Corey. Thanks, Jesse.
You're welcome. See ya.